Hello, guys. Let's get started.
Title: The Tale of Johnny, A Journey Through the Signs of Unintelligence. Hey Reddit, I know this might sound a little harsh, but hear me out. I've been reflecting on this guy I know. Let's call him Johnny, and I'm starting to believe that he's genuinely unintelligent. But here's the thing. It's not just the typical stuff we think of when we talk about dumb people. He doesn't have a low IQ or anything. But there are subtle signs that make me believe his inability to engage meaningfully with the world around him is something deeper, something fundamental about how he approaches life. Let me break it down for you in case you've ever encountered someone like Johnny. Maybe you'll spot some of these same signs in people you know. 1. A lack of curiosity. The first thing I noticed about Johnny was his utter lack of curiosity. You know how most people, when they're faced with something new, will ask a question or try to understand more about it. Johnny just doesn't. Ever. It's not that he's shy or introverted. No, he'll talk to anyone, and he'll engage in conversations. But when it comes to things that should make him wonder or think, he's utterly uninterested. One time, we were talking about a new scientific discovery, and everyone in the group was throwing around theories and questions. Johnny just sat there, staring off into the distance. I jokingly said, "Don't you want to know more about that?" And his response, "Nah, I'm good. I don't really care about stuff like that." That's when it hit me. People who don't have a curiosity about the world don't just miss out on knowledge. They also miss out on critical thinking. They're not actively processing or analyzing things. They're just existing in the world without engaging with it. 2. Inability to learn from experience. This one is huge. Johnny will make the same mistake over and over again without ever learning from it. And it's not like he lacks self-awareness. He's not oblivious to his mistakes, but he seems incapable of applying what he's learned in one situation to another. It's like a recurring loop of failure that never teaches him anything. For example, Johnny always shows up late to things. Doesn't matter if it's work, a social gathering, or a meeting. We're talking always. When he first started being late, he claimed he just didn't know how to manage his time well. So, we all gave him tips. Set an alarm, plan ahead, use Google Maps to check traffic, all the basics. But then, it never changed. He'd still be late. The crazy part is that when you call him out on it, he gets defensive but then does the same thing next time. It's like a mental block, or maybe a lack of understanding of consequences. A truly intelligent person would adjust their behavior based on past experiences. Johnny, not so much. 3. Surface-level conversations. Have you ever had a conversation with someone that felt like it was on autopilot? That's Johnny in a nutshell. His conversations never go deep. Ever. It's always just surface-level stuff like, "Did you watch that new movie?" Or "The weather's weird today, huh?" And when he talks about topics that should require depth, like politics, philosophy, or even just discussing books, you can tell he's not really engaging. It's almost like he's parroting back what he's heard from TV or social media without really grasping the implications of what's being said. One time, I mentioned a book I had just finished reading, *Sapiens: A Brief History of Humankind*, which is pretty deep, talking about the evolution of human beings, societies, and history. Johnny looked at me and said, "Yeah, I read that. It was pretty boring, though. I didn't really get what the point was. It's like, we're all just animals, right?" It was as if the whole book had flown over his head. And it's not like I expect everyone to love the book or get everything. But his response wasn't even an attempt to dive deeper or engage critically with the content. It was just a dead-end comment, a sign that he wasn't thinking critically about the subject matter at all. 4. Lack of emotional intelligence. This one is tricky, but I think it's a huge sign of Johnny's unintelligence. Emotional intelligence is the ability to recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions, as well as the emotions of others. It's crucial for meaningful relationships and effective problem-solving. Johnny completely lacks it. There's this one friend of ours, Sarah, who is always stressed out at work. You can see it in her face, and everyone can feel the tension. One day, Sarah was talking about how overwhelmed she was, and Johnny's response was, "Well, that sucks. But you gotta deal with it. Everyone's stressed, right?" That was it. No empathy, no trying to offer support or understanding. He didn't even acknowledge her feelings. He just brushed them aside as if they weren't important. And this wasn't an isolated incident. It happens all the time. He's great at talking about himself, but when someone else is struggling, Johnny doesn't know how to respond. Emotional intelligence isn't just about being nice or kind, though that's part of it. It's about understanding human behavior and reactions, and Johnny is completely disconnected from that. His responses to people's emotional needs are almost robotic in nature, and he doesn't even realize it. It's like he's so wrapped up in his own world that he can't see the emotional landscapes of others. 5. Being closed-minded and stubborn. This is another glaring sign that Johnny isn't the sharpest tool in the shed. It's not that he doesn't have opinions. Everyone has opinions. But Johnny is absolutely convinced that he knows everything, and there's no room for debate or new information. He's the type of person who will argue the same point over and over, even if presented with concrete evidence that contradicts his stance. A prime example of this occurred when we were talking about climate change. Johnny went on this long, misguided rant about how it was all a hoax and that scientists were just making things up for political gain. No matter how many sources we threw at him or how many logical counterarguments we made, Johnny refused to budge. He had his mind made up, and that was the end of it. Now, I'm not saying he has to agree with everyone, but when someone is so closed off to learning new information, it's a clear sign that they're not open to growth or critical thinking. They're locked into a worldview that is so rigid, no new idea can penetrate. 6. Avoiding complexity. I've noticed that Johnny seems to avoid anything that requires complex thought. If a problem is too challenging, he either tries to delegate it to someone else or pretends it doesn't exist. He has a tendency to keep things simple, even when simple isn't the right answer. For instance, I remember a work project where we were asked to come up with a solution to a problem that required some real critical thinking. Johnny's response was, "Can't we just do it the way we did it last time? That worked fine." This was a problem that needed innovation, not repeating past mistakes, but Johnny didn't want to put in the mental effort. When you consistently avoid tackling complex issues, you're not really growing. You're staying in a bubble of comfort and avoiding anything that requires real intellectual effort. 7. Overconfidence in the wrong areas. Perhaps the most irritating thing about Johnny is how incredibly confident he is in his abilities, even when he has no expertise. He'll act like he knows everything about a subject, even if he's barely scratched the surface. This overconfidence often leads to him giving unsolicited advice or trying to teach others things he knows nothing about. The worst part? He doesn't even realize how little he knows. There's this one time we were discussing the basics of programming, and Johnny jumped in, claiming that he was an expert because he'd built a simple website in college. He proceeded to give us all a lecture on how to code, despite being years behind in terms of knowledge. It was painful to watch, but when we gently corrected him, he got defensive and insisted that he was right. It's this overconfidence without any real backing that often clouds his judgment and prevents him from learning or growing. Conclusion: I'm sure Johnny is a great guy, but if I'm being honest, it's becoming harder to ignore these signs of genuine unintelligence. And I'm not saying he's dumb in the traditional sense. He's just limited. His inability to learn from experience, lack of curiosity, emotional detachment, and stubbornness are all signs that there's something holding him back intellectually. It's one thing to be unaware of your weaknesses, but it's another thing entirely to actively resist change or growth. And that, unfortunately, seems to be Johnny's biggest issue. If you've ever had a friend like Johnny, you know what I'm talking about. It's frustrating, but it's also a reminder that intelligence isn't just about book smarts. It's about how you engage with the world, how you process information, and how willing you are to adapt and grow. Thanks for reading, and feel free to share your own experiences. Do you have a Johnny in your life?